Hey everybody, BTO Pro here. Today I'm going to dig into an element that is in PolymerElement. We're going to convert it to LitElement. And just to show that there's no difference in the end as far as implementation point. So this is a huge reason that we bought in on web components pretty hard is let's say we have something that's out in production and it's this little widget here, right? So it's just this little paper avatar. And the paper avatar has an SRC, and then it can optionally support things like Jdenticon to do this nice little artwork based on the name. And it also has support for 2 characters, so it can take like Robert Smith and turn it into an RS. This is a very common piece of an interface. Particularly, you see this in like Microsoft products, things like that, right? Outlook, calendar type of thing. So I have this in production somewhere. So this is on my blog. I'm doing some just local development work, and you'll see I have this little picture of me. So the picture of me is actually this paper avatar tag, just to prove that's what it is. You see it says it's set up to be 2 characters in the event that there isn't an image there. Now it's using the image of my headshot because I've supplied that under the hood. So this is an application that's out running in the wild, and we want to just pull down and improve the performance of an individual brick. So that's the context we're working within. So looking at this quickly, you'll see this is a Polymer element, and we're not going to be able to replace all these dependencies, right? So for one, we have this resolve URL thing in which we're pulling down what the address is of this tag and then engineering a path to a non-JS module based library to integrate, in this case called Jdenticon. So there's a little bit of a quirk to it. We're not going to be replacing everything. But to see how I've plowed through, I've done probably 20 of these upgrades recently. We have like over 300 Polymer elements that we're converting. So the first step that I always do in this is we're going to switch from Polymer element to LitElement. And we can see here that I'm pulling in another function. It's called HTML. That's going to do that rendering, but I also pull in a CSS function as well. And now we come back down, say, okay, LitElement, and I just copy and paste a snippet I already had. Whoops. So we use template literal syntax here, and then I am shipping these in via the styles method of LitElement. So I'm going to convert this into a format that can work a lot more performant, particularly going forward with things like constructible style sheets if we ever need them. But so I'm going to take my old CSS that's in here, or paste it up here, and then I'll look through and see, is there anything in here that needs cleaned up syntax-wise? There shouldn't be. This is just using some basic CSS variables and passing those down. So now I've got the tag. This isn't, I just want to point this out. I keep trying to do it. I'm trying to do a little bit of doc blocking here. So a convention our team uses. This isn't actually part of quote unquote the platform or the HTML element specification, but I've found it really useful to know what the tag is, letting the class-based object define it. Styles also isn't. So what I'm trying to start to do is do this. LitElement style method. Trying to leave notes for future me or for future other team members as to what these different pieces do, what are the actual platform, what's our convention, what's LitElement library helper itself. So another change from Polymer is that this is no longer called getTemplate, it's render. And this is LitElement render method. Okay, so that is again not platform specific. It's not something that the browser natively supports. But template literal syntax is. So that's kind of a nice aspect to this. So we're going to go and we're going to update that old data binding here. Let's give me this label. And so it's no longer going to be built based on what is going on with Polymer element with these little brackets. It's going to be template literal syntax. So Now, another fun thing with this is conditional DOM rendering. So I no longer need to do DOM ifs, which is it's certainly not as performant as what's now available. So what I can do is I can do this. We'll say if this.src, then HTML, otherwise nothing. And then I can throw my image tag in there. Okay, we'll get rid of this template. Now we need to update the data binding syntax here. So a lot of the conventions have just shifted, but they have the same capabilities effectively. Okay, color there for title. Then we no longer do event binding this way. So instead of the on hyphen, we do this with an @ symbol. And there are other ways to achieve this that could be more quote unquote platform, you know, or use the platform, the web browser type of spec, right? I could write a whole verbose, this dot shadow root dot query selector, target the thing, but I'm just not going to for the purposes of this. So, okay, that should have cleared up that aspect of the world. Now we need to see, do we have a constructor? We don't. Now in LitElement, constructor is where we define, and now keeping with what I'm doing here, this is HTML element specification, right? Has a constructor. And this is LitElement convention. And in fact, for the properties, I end up putting LitElement / popular library convention. I do that because Polymer uses this. I've seen other libraries. I think Skate might do it this way too. So now in my constructor, I do super, and now we're going to set the default values for these things. Whoops. So it's going to be this dot src equals false in this case. And do we have that up here anywhere? This dot src. So I don't even need the false, right? I could do null, and that should evaluate that it doesn't satisfy this case, and so it does the fallback. You know, this is a else if, or if else rather. So null. What are you complaining about with that? Expression expected. Shouldn't be expression. Okay, so now we can go. We're gonna have to replace the observer. I'll do that in a second. And so we go through and we update all of these so that we no longer have the values pegged off of here, because Polymer used to do it this way, but LitElement doesn't. You have to define it directly, which is fine. It's way less code in LitElement versus Polymer because of things like this. All right, so then we're going to take out false. Another thing we'll have to look for is there is no connotation of update styles to my knowledge here, so I'll have to look into that. But there's no ready lifecycle. Now, if there were a ready lifecycle, and this is not what this is for, but it seems like it's useful, is first updated is a LitElement lifecycle shadow DOM properties mapped. So shadow DOM exists once we have first updated called. So I like to tap in there. And then I'm using that for what was the ready lifecycle hook, which was a Polymer specific thing. So I'm just going to paste my code in there. Now, disconnected callback is a HTML element lifecycle. It's built into the platform. And then we've got some other, you know, just class structure that is hitched off of here. So I need to also check for there's a convention in Polymer that I know I use, which is this $. Now this is the equivalent of writing this dot shadow root dot query selector, and then it's query selecting a ID. So that is the equivalent statement, which then also removes this dependency on Polymer. Another nice thing, you can do this in anything, right? It's identical. So if you're trying to slowly get off of your old conventions, if you have a large Polymer portfolio, it's another way that you can do that. So, all right, first updated. I'm going to comment out this .update styles. I'll have to figure out a replacement for that at a later point in time. Now, the thing that I really want to get is this observer. So we're going to get observer out of there because that's not a concept anymore. Now, in Polymer, what observer would do, and I'm just checking one thing real quick. Nope, okay. So what Polymer would do with observers is whenever a property or attribute would be updated, it would notify you directly on that property. And so then you would be able to run a callback and you'd have the new value and the old value. LitElement just consolidates all of that into mapping attributes to properties and then having this updated callback. So this runs every time there is a changed property. Now I'm going to say that this is LitElement specific property update. It's kind of a life cycle, but it happens throughout. So I'm going to loop through my properties that have changed, and what is it we're observing is label. So whenever label changes, so in this case we're going to say property name, label. Whenever label changes, we are going to run this observer, which is observed label. We're going to pass in the new value, and then we have access to the old value. And why that's important is, and actually, never mind, I can just do the new label. I didn't use it in this one, but why that's useful is that that is the way that Polymer used to do it, if you're familiar with that, so you can monitor like what a value was on the previous step so that you can monitor it for changes, and maybe you have something's tripped from false to true, you want to handle that differently than if it's from true to false or whatever. So that should be all of the specific conventions except for this .update styles, which I'm going to have to look for a way to do if that's even problematic. Okay, so I should be ported over. Now I can take out this DOM-if. We don't use that anymore, which is awesome. I do still need this path from URL, which just, again, helps resolve that into a legitimate URL. I'll figure out a way to get rid of that dependency soon. So now we refresh, and if all goes well, which it largely did, other than CSS variable part. Oh, you can see there's the colors there. Let's look. So if we go into console, we don't have any errors in the console. We do have our paper avatar with the name, and then I believe Robert Smith has an R there. So we need to do 2 chars. This is another little aspect to this, 2 chars. When we define it, we need to also say attribute is actually 2 chars. And this will allow for the attribute binding to be mapped appropriately. So you can see now it has the RS there. Previously just had R because it wasn't mapped correctly from the attribute coming in. So by default, it's just specifically this, but there's no way of doing that as valid HTML. So you can define the attribute it's pegged to. Now, I haven't had a use case for this, but you could do like 3 chars and account for that mapping back to 2. I don't really know why you would want the attribute to be out of sync with this camel case name, but I mean, I guess it's useful. Okay, so the last piece is this background color variable. That the background color variable is on the host itself. So I think it might be better if I have set that there, and then it's defaulting to the avatar color initially, and then the background color, and we'll just do like blue so that we can see that it actually is applying. Yeah, okay, so it is applying. So let's have some fallback that's just very generalized, right? So if let's space, I don't like my linter spaces it that way. So if there's the avatar color, use it. If not, then use the background color. And if not that, then use the color blue. Just do something, please, basically. So text color, you can see we already have a default mapped out for that. Now, if we don't have this predefined, let's see, do we have that one defined? Okay, we do. We have that at 40 pixels. So then background color won't be set. So instead of this update styles, right, because I need to get rid of that, we should be able to do this dot styles dot background color equals, and then parse a color off the label. I think that's valid. Perhaps not. Nope, it said no. Cannot set background color on undefined. Dot styles. I'm trying to think of what the actual syntax is. Oh, it's dot style, not styles. Let's see if that's it. Hey, there we go. Awesome. So, and now I removed that other Polymer dependency there. So now we should have exactly what we had previously, and you see even the little Denticon thing enhances. Hey, and the Elms logo has blue in the background. Now, that would be a case for, you know, changing behavior, right? So I changed that to blue. Let's set that to nothing again. And now you can see we have the Elms logo suite like that, and these all still work, and they load in. You can't even tell they're painting. And now I can go back to my avatar in place. Hey, there we are. Now, and again, this would be, you know, more of a production environment use case. This is still paper avatar, but now all the guts within here are being driven by LitElement. And I know it's driven by LitElement because I don't have that DOM if statement in here anymore. So hopefully this was a useful video to you as far as like seeing what the difference is to this and kind of the step through process, because I have been converting a lot of these. If you have any questions about LitElement or web components in general, I'm at BTOPro on the Twitter webs and other platforms, particularly the Polymer Slack channel, where I'm pretty active too. So thanks for checking us out.